Have you ever made a decision with your money and then later just looked back and thought, what on earth was I thinking? Maybe you sold a stock that was doing great way too early, or maybe you held on to a losing one for way too long, just hoping it would turn around. Well, guess what? You're definitely not alone. It turns out our brains might just be hardwired to be, well, kind of bad with money. So today, let's dive into this fascinating world of behavioral finance and figure out exactly why.
For decades, the main idea in finance was pretty simple. Markets are rational, they're efficient, end of story. But if that's really true, how do you explain these massive, world-shaking events? I'm talking about things like the tech bubble in the late 90s, where company valuations just went completely off the rails before it all came crashing down, or huge sudden drops like Black Monday in '87. Events like these are proof that there's something else going on, something a little more human.
And this right here, this slide really gets to the heart of it. On one side, you have traditional finance. It's built on this really neat and tidy model where everyone acts like a perfect calculator and markets work like a flawless machine. But then behavioral finance comes along and basically says, yeah, hold on a minute. People aren't robots. We have feelings, we have biases, we take mental shortcuts, and all of that causes us to make predictable mistakes. And because of that, markets can get messy and prices can be just plain wrong for a really, really long time.
So, if we want to understand why markets sometimes go completely haywire, we need a whole new way of looking at things. And that, right there, is where behavioral finance steps in. It's this amazing field that smashes psychology and economics together to paint a much more realistic picture of how financial markets actually work.
So here's the absolute key idea. Behavioral finance looks at how our own minds, our own psychology, can lead to these wild and sometimes totally illogical results in the market. Now, it's not about throwing out all the old school finance theories. Not at all. It's about adding a super critical layer on top, the human element. It's a reminder that behind every stock chart, behind every single trade, there's a person with hopes, fears, and a whole bunch of quirky cognitive glitches.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, behavioral finance is basically built on two big ideas, two main pillars. If you can understand these two concepts, you've pretty much got the whole field figured out.
Okay, so pillar number one is cognitive psychology. That's all about the predictable, systematic errors our brains make when we're trying to process information and make decisions about money. And then there's pillar number two, what's called the limits to arbitrage. This one is so important because it explains why, even when these brain glitches create really obvious wrong prices in the market, the so-called smart money can't always just jump in and magically fix everything.
So let's jump right into that first pillar and look at a couple of the most common and frankly most expensive biases that mess with almost every single investor out there. You can think of these as the little mental bugs in our operating system that trip us all up.
All right, first up, and this one is a biggie. It's called the disposition effect. See, we loathe admitting that we made a mistake. So if we buy a stock and it goes down, we refuse to sell and lock in that loss. We tell ourselves, oh, I'll just wait for it to get back to what I paid for it. But what about stocks that have gone up? Well, we can't wait to hit that sell button, cash in, and feel like a genius. The problem is we sell way too early, and we often leave a ton of potential profit on the table.
Now, get this. This quote from finance professor Jay Ritter is just perfect. He points out that by selling our winners and holding on to our losers, we are literally doing the exact opposite of what a smart, tax-conscious investor should do. I mean, you're supposed to sell your losers to get a tax deduction and let your winners keep growing. Our brains make us act like we want to pay more in taxes. It is perfectly irrational.
Okay, quick question for you, and be honest with yourself. When you think about your own skills as an investor, do you think you're better than the average person? If you just nodded or thought, yeah, probably, well, you might be falling victim to our next bias.
This is a classic example of overconfidence, and believe me, it is everywhere in the world of finance. There was this landmark study by two researchers, Barber and Odine, who dug into thousands and thousands of brokerage accounts, and what they found was just fascinating. They found that men, on average, tended to be more overconfident about their investing skills than women were. And what did that lead to? It led them to trade way more often, constantly buying and selling. And the result of all that activity? It actually hurt their returns. On average, the men's portfolios did worse than the women's. It's an incredible lesson in how thinking you're smarter than everyone else can actually make you poor.
All right, so we've established that people are biased. Our brains make mistakes. But I know what you might be thinking. Okay, but shouldn't the pros, the hedge funds, the professional traders, shouldn't they just take advantage of all these silly mistakes and correct them? Well, that brings us right to our second pillar, the limits to arbitrage. And as it turns out, it is not nearly as easy as it sounds.
Let's use a classic real-world example to see why. Way back in 1907, two huge oil companies, Royal Dutch and Shell, basically merged their businesses. They set up an agreement that said their stock should always be valued at a fixed 60-40 ratio. This is like a dream scenario for a finance textbook, a crystal clear, predictable relationship. Anytime the prices drifted from that ratio, it should have been an easy, risk-free profit for any smart trader.
So, did the market keep the prices perfectly in line? Nope, not even close. For more than 20 years, the prices were almost never where they were supposed to be. Sometimes Royal Dutch was 10% too expensive. Other times, Shell was 15% too cheap. The really mind-blowing thing here isn't just that the market got it wrong, it's that it stayed wrong for years and years at a time.
And here is the real kicker. The legendary hedge fund Long-Term Capital Management, a firm literally staffed with Nobel Prize-winning economists, the supposed smartest guys in the room, they tried to make this exact trade. They bet that the prices would return to normal. A surefire win, right? Wrong. The gap between the two stocks actually got wider. LTCM lost billions of dollars and was forced to close its position, and by doing that, their selling actually made the market even more irrational for a while. It's the ultimate proof that even the absolute brainiest people in the world can't always fix these irrational market quirks.
Okay, so we've talked about all these psychological biases, and we've seen why even the pros can't always save us from them. But what does all this actually mean for you, for your own financial life? How can you use this stuff?
So let's wrap this all up. What are the big takeaways here? First, markets aren't these perfect rational machines because the people who make up the markets aren't. We're all predictably irrational. Second, every single one of us has these cognitive biases. Nobody is immune. But, and this is the most important part, simply being aware of these biases, just knowing that something like the disposition effect exists, or knowing that you might be a little overconfident, that is the single biggest step you can take toward making better financial decisions. It gives you the power to stop, to question your own gut feelings, and to choose a more logical path.
So, I'll just leave you with this one final thought. The next time you're about to make a move with your money, whether it's buying, selling, or just holding on, just press pause for a second. Ask yourself, am I really thinking this through clearly, or is my brain just running its old buggy software on autopilot? Knowing the difference? Well, that's not just interesting trivia. It could be the key to mastering your own financial future.